Leinster have to dig deep to beat Glasgow. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. This one was a really hard-fought game between these, but before we got going, we had a minute's silence for Cornell Hendricks. I've talked about it in all the videos I made today, and it's a very tragic event. Losing his life at 37 to a heart attack shouldn't happen to anyone, and condolences to his family and friends. Just sad affair. So, on to the game. Glasgow, they hold on to the ball for a long period at the opening minutes, and we're seeing Tuipulotu and Jones combining really well, and that's a good sign for them, I think, for the playoffs. And they're able to release Stain out wide. Leinster scramble, but then they give away a penalty. Glasgow kick that to the corner. Leinster disrupt and Glasgow knock on, but there's some handbags afterwards, and Sheehan gets pinged for escalating it. Glasgow go back to the corner. Then they shift it through the backs, but then Baird forces a knock on, and Fintan Gunn is able to kick clear. Good work in defence from Barrett and Porter there too. Porter getting in to really disrupt the Glasgow at the breakdown, and made the ball really slow, and then allowed Baird to get in there after him. Then Hastings, really smart kicking from him, and it's keeping Glasgow in the right areas. In the opening about 20 minutes or so of the game, Conan then not supporting his body weight, and Glasgow, they look to get some points for all of the pressure they've had, but Hastings is off target. It was very kickable as well for somebody of his ability. Leinster, they've soaked up all that pressure, and now you're feeling, they're beginning to come forward. Are Glasgow going to handle that momentum switch? So Leinster, they claim the ball from an up and under, and Henshaw breaks into 22, but then his pass inside goes to the ground. And there was a lot of that from Leinster tonight in attack. A lot of kind of offloads that didn't necessarily need to be offloads. His pass, in fairness now, his one wasn't that bad. Like it was a decent enough pass, but Gunn couldn't hold it. But still, a little bit more sympathy on the passes, and maybe just keeping hold of the ball a little bit more certainly was needed from them. But then they come again, but then Prendergast drops the ball as they go through the phases. Good defence from Glasgow to hold them and putting that pressure on as well. You can see Glasgow really stepped up their performance compared to that Champions Cup quarter final, and especially as well compared to their recent performances in the URC where they dropped off. Then Jimmy O'Brien takes a quick throw, and it was from, I think, he takes it, gives it to Prendergast, who puts up and under, and then brilliant take against Rowe, and Leinster with a bit of front foot. Then they managed to force a penalty at a scrum at the 22. Prendergast takes it quickly, finds Jimmy O'Brien on the left. He collects it and dots it down, but then we have a TMO check. He's not on the mark. He's moved about 3 meters or so away from it before he kicks it, so it's chalked off. We restart with a scrum to Glasgow. Jordy Barrett then pokes a kick through, which hits the inside of the base of the post. Hastings then knocks it on with a brush of the hand, and a really tight call, that one. 5-minute scrum to Leinster. Like, it was very, it was kind of freeze framing kind of stuff on that. And I found actually, not necessarily the decisions, like, I don't generally argue about the decisions from the officials, but I felt that there was a lot of kind of micro analysis of stuff on both sides tonight as well in this game. Maybe I don't know. I wasn't really a fan of the way little tiny things were being checked and stuff. But that's the technology we have, and if it's there, like if the referee wants to use it, then he can use it. So from here, then dominant scrum from Leinster. Conan off the back. He gets stopped. Barrett then smashed by Richardson. He got a pass like up around his neck though. So he kind of, that opened his ribs for Richardson to hit him. And then they get held up over the line. They come back for a penalty to Leinster. They opt for the scrum. Then they go wide from a free kick from that scrum. And O'Brien gets over in the same corner. This time it stands. Nice fluid move. And converted from the touchline from Prendergast, 7 points to 0. Hastings kicking gets Warriors back into Leinster territory and they're working into 22, but Snyman gets a turnover and Leinster can clear. Leinster then win a scrum penalty and a call for the tee. Prendergast kick though off target and Glasgow can clear. And it felt like a knockout game this. There was a lot of nerves on either side, like players, missing things that nobody wouldn't on both sides. Then Tuipulotu chips, collects his own kick and he goes for another one, but Osborne beats him to it. We do have a TMO check, to check if Osborne pushed him off the ball. The officials decide there was nothing in it, but honestly, I thought that Osborne did push him. So I think Glasgow could feel a little hard done by on that one. Then we restart with a Glasgow line out. They're pushed back outside of the 22 to go wide to Ferry. And then Tommy O'Brien just puts in a massive hit to put him into touch. And halftime it's 7 points to 0. In the second half, before that actually, at halftime, Tom Jordan replaces Tuipulotu. Feels like Glasgow may be protecting him for the knockout rounds because he was certainly sitting on the bench smiling and laughing. And if he was, had a serious injury or whatever, he wouldn't have been doing that. Then into that second half, we have a TMO check for a tackle by Jordan on Tommy O'Brien. There is an attempt to wrap, so it's all good. It was just kind of one of those ones where, when you see it the first time, because it's kind of O'Brien is kicking it, and so the camera is following the ball, and then you just see him coming in, like flying into the tackle. It wasn't late. It was one of those ones where he's committed to the tackle. He's obviously hit him after he's kicked it, but it's not a late tackle. And there is a wrap there, so everything's fine. Then we have great defense from the Warriors, and they managed to push Leinster to the edge from the edge of the 22 to halfway, but then they concede a penalty from which Prendergast then misses touch, and again, just those little bits on either side. Leinster then beginning to up the pace, and we have a break from Tommy O'Brien, gets him into 22, repelled. Then Keenan, lovely footwork out wide, combines with Tommy O'Brien. Then they're up within like 5 meters line. Then they move her from right to left. Prendergast then knocks on as he went for the corner on the far side. Glasgow defence really standing up well for them. Then we have hands on the ground from Glasgow, and it's a penalty to Leinster. But then Conan had knocked on just before that, so it's actually restarting with a scrum to Glasgow, and then Leinster win a penalty at the scrum anyway. So Prendergast slots that for 10 points to 0. Glasgow then break through row. They get onto the edge. Horn kicks the ball through, but it kind of goes, doesn't go straight. It goes out to the right, and Cancellieri's out there, and he kind of stretches and he kicks it back inside with an outstretched leg, and Horn gets there first to score. Conversion is missed, 10 points to 5. Leinster on top so far in the second half, but they really are forcing things on too many occasions, and it feels like they need a little bit of calmness within the team. You're seeing there's a mix of senior and newer guys to the first team out there, but you're not really seeing much leadership. And you're even seeing the likes of Barrett, who is absolutely stellar player, making mistakes as well. Then Glasgow with a chance from a line out on the edge of Leinster 22, but Baird nicks it for Leinster and they're able to clear. Then Leinster working back into the 22. They're within a few meters, and then they force a penalty. So Frawley slots that for 13 points to 5, and that was a full-time score. So real battle between these two teams, and I think both teams take something out of it. But we'll talk about that after the stats. So let me pull the stats up here on the official site. Right, so there we go. So on attack first, try scored, one each, and it was just one of those games, right? There weren't going to be all that many tries, especially, with defenses so on top. And then because of that, both attacks having to push things that little bit further than neither team really in amazing kind of oiled form in this game. So having to do things that split second quicker, and with that little bit more pressure, the defense that bit quicker up in their face as well, just made it really hard. And one try each was pretty fair. Possession then 56-44 for Leinster, which is a decent turnaround given that Glasgow had the ball for at least the first 15 to 20 minutes of the game. Clean breaks 5 each. Defenders beaten 10 for Leinster, 22 for Warriors. So that tells you the Leinster scramble was the better of the two, because if they've missed 22 tackles and they've only allowed 5 clean breaks, so that's it, much better than Glasgow did with just 10 missed tackles and 5 clean breaks from Leinster. Offloads then 8 from Leinster and 5 for the Warriors, but certainly on the Leinster side, but I think on Glasgow too, there could have been a few less offloads, maybe a few more rucks and recycles, just to consolidate, because teams are making breaks and then they go for the offload, and then there'd be a knock on or 2 or wherever, and then that little bit of momentum that they had would be gone. Onto defence then, territory 61% to 39 in favour of Leinster, and that was the thing in the second half, that they, for a long time in the second half, they only had a 5-point lead, but most of the game was in the Glasgow half, so it didn't feel like they weren't kind of camped on their line trying to hold Glasgow out, who were looking for the try to go ahead, So it wasn't a kind of backs against the wall effort from Leinster, but they still had to face a lot of adversity in this. Number of tackles then, 119 for Leinster, 131 for Glasgow, so that kind of shows the ebb and flow of the game, because it's rare that both teams have to make over 100 tackles. Normally you're seeing, one team well over 100 and the other team maybe about kind of 60% to half of that number of tackles. Then missed tackles 22 to 10. Tackle success 80% for Leinster, which is, kind of around where you expect them to be, maybe around 82, 83%. 85 for Glasgow is, in that sweet spot for the URC. So a good performance, especially when we've seen a lot of tackle performances in recent weeks being in the 70s, even in the mid 70s as well. So very good from Glasgow there in defence. Turnovers 1, then 5 for Leinster, 3 for Glasgow, and both teams, stifling the opposition, getting in there to win vital turnovers close to their own line as well. So again, really was defences on top. Onto kicking then, kicks retained 8 each, and kicking played a big part in this game. First of all, you had Hastings in the first half, getting Glasgow in those decent position, pinning Leinster back as well. And then second half, then you saw Prendergast doing a bit more for Leinster. You had the likes of Jimmy O'Brien and Tommy O'Brien and Keenan as well, looking for those contestable kicks. And on the other side from Glasgow, too, you had the likes of Rowe and Stain getting in there too, and then Tom Jordan when he come on as well. So, plenty of contests there, and that was one of the kind of more entertaining parts of this, at least for me, was seeing those contests in the air. Then penalties, 6 for Leinster, 8 for Glasgow, so both staying on the right side of the officials, and a lot really, like, other than there was a couple of bouts of handbags, other than that, like, there wasn't much need for the referees to be speaking to the teams about discipline or anything like that. There was a bit of chat about, when the front rows changed, that we didn't have as clean a setup for the scrums. And then we did have the kind of the incidents where they were checking stuff. But, the thing is, it has to be checked, right? And sometimes all the checks are done in the background, but some of them have to be checked, brought to referee's attention, and they're not always going to be anything. But the fact that they're checked kind of gives you a little bit of, a little bit of security in that. So on to players then, attack. So 1 try for Jimmy O'Brien and 1 for George Horn, and that's it. Like, there were no other tries in the game. But Horn, Glasgow's top scorer all time, and then he comes off the bench and adds another one to that. Then successful carries, Jack Conan with 7 for Leinster, Kyle Rowe with 4 for Glasgow. Thought he was pretty decent. And then on to clean breaks, Tommy O'Brien with 1 for Leinster, and Kyle Rowe again for Glasgow with 2. Defenders beaten, Tommy O'Brien 2 and Kyle Rowe 6. And Rowe, if Glasgow had won the game, I think he probably would have been in there for player of the match. On to then meters made, Tommy O'Brien made 83 and Kyle Rowe 80. Offloads, RG Snyman with 5 and Rory Darge at 1. But Snyman, like, there was one where he basically did an offload where he his basketball type over the top offloads, right? He did that, and I can't remember who it was, but he basically almost hit his own player in the face with the ball, and then he had to struggle to, first of all, collect the ball, and then struggle to get his knees on the ground because he got swallowed up by Glasgow players trying to keep him up. And I think that was definitely a tactic from them when they saw it, was when they saw Snyman looking for that kind of offload, was to target the guy that was going to get the ball, and he almost turned the ball over there as well. So yeah, again, maybe a few less offloads because they didn't lead to breaks or anything like that. It wasn't like some of his offloads are fantastic, but just not this evening. On to defence then, Scott Penny with 13 tackles to Mackenzie Duncan, who I thought had a really good game for Glasgow as well. 14 from him. Turnovers 1 then, 2 for Ryan Baird, and he was very disruptive in the lineup as well. And then Ewan Ferry with 1 for Glasgow. So let's have a chat about the team. So we start with Glasgow. They lost this one, but it wasn't the shellacking that they got in that quarterfinal of the Champions Cup. It was an hugely improved performance on that, improved performance on the recent form in the URC as well. And, the fact that in the first half, Jones and Tuipulotu looked back, on it like, neither of them had ever been injured is a brilliant sign for them as well. And, in the first half, they were causing Leinster problems with the way they were moving the ball. So that's certainly a good sign. A lot more backbone in their performance here as well. The things that they will be worried about is, Leinster disrupted the line out a lot. So that was one of their platforms gone. And then also, Leinster put them under a lot of pressure in the scrum to the point where they conceded, the only penalty that they'd given away on their own feet as well at the scrum. So certainly parts to be fixed there for them, but defense was excellent. And again, at times, the attack looked good, but probably not enough. But again, kicking game, decision making, I thought was excellent at times from them too. So just need to string all of that together and work on the areas that were problems. But, they're going in now to the quarterfinals despite this performance. Well, it's kind of not really because of this performance, but because of this loss, right? But they're going in 4th, where like a couple of rounds ago they were sitting 2nd. So it's going to be a tough game for them. They're going to be entertaining the Stormers, so that's going to be really tough game for them. But this is definitely going to help them set up for that. So well done to them on the performance. Unlucky on the results. On to Leinster then. So, they had to soak up that pressure for the first 20 minutes or so. They did that. Then they got themselves on the front foot. They got ahead, but then they couldn't kick on from there. And it really did feel like they were forcing way too much, looking for too many offloads, too intricate in their attack. They weren't trying to keep it simple. And also when they did break, the likes of Tommy O'Brien, and then Keenan, etc., getting in there and supporting and getting that fast ball wasn't happening. So it meant that, they had to kind of go again, even if they got within 5 meters of the line. They didn't have that kind of, trailing runner who's going to either take a popped offload from the deck or come in as a cleaner and get that, quicker ball as the scrum half comes in behind or wherever, and then they whip it away and score. They weren't able to do that tonight. And a little bit too much in terms of trying to force the game, but set piece went well for them, both on attack and defense. Their defense looked good too. Scrambles back there, the scramble really was poor against Northampton, but they seem to got it back on there as well. And also a lot, it wasn't like a full team that they put out, but a lot of those guys are players you would expect, to be in the kind of the first 23 for big games. So that's good to see as well, that they didn't rotate too many players out of the matchday squad. Then, on top of that as well, they had to face adversity here, and, they were able to kind of keep Glasgow at bay, and then crucially, go and score that penalty towards the end as well to stretch it out to an 8-point lead so that Glasgow couldn't nick it right at the death. So, good signs for Leinster, because I've talked about it so many times. They need games like this to be able to learn how to win tight games, because this team they're so used to kind of, if you look at this game, the way a typical Leinster win would go is that first 20 minutes they soak up, then they hit and they score, right? And then just before halftime to get another score, just after halftime to get another score, and suddenly they've got maybe, let's say, a 17 or 19 point lead, right? Then the opposition start coming back a little bit, and maybe they score, but Leinster respond to it. And by the time we're into the last 20 minutes or so, they've maybe built up, somewhere around 20 odd point lead, right? And then in the final 20 minutes, maybe the opposition get over for a try or two and bring the score back a little bit, but Leinster is still comfortable. That's kind of your normal Leinster type win, right? In these types of situations. But today, it didn't happen for them. They couldn't get that score either, just before, just after half time. They really had to dig in, Glasgow coming back within 5 points, and then they had to go again. They were pragmatic as well. They were taking their kicks, which was good to see, because they absolutely should have taken that kick in the Champions Cup semi-final. But, again, good learning for this group of players, especially for kind of the younger players to come through. But also, like, you've got senior players who've been in there for a number of years, and they generally would have been rested for a game like this, where, from Leinster's point of view, there was nothing riding on it in terms of they weren't going to finish any higher in the league if they won, or any lower if they lost. So, generally, you probably, if they were in the Champions Cup final, like, they probably would have still made a mistake of resting players this week, and then wondered why those players then they went into the final or into the URC knockouts or wherever it is and didn't perform. And hopefully the fact that those, the bulk of those players have played in this game, and they've been at the coalface and they've been under pressure, and they've come out the other side of it, that's going to help them, because they're definitely going to be under pressure, whether, it's going to be in their quarterfinal or whether they manage to progress any further, if it's going to be in other games as well this season. But they're definitely not going to, like, just sail through and be like handed the trophy or whatever. They're going to, if they're going to win this URC, they know they've got to fight for it. And the fight that they showed in this game at least is a good starting point for them. But definitely need a lot for them to improve on, but still some good things to take out of this game. I think that's both teams, you can probably say that about. Okay, so that's the end of this one. Let me know what you think down in the comments.